Make sure the germs that pass from hand to hand this winter are kept under control. Help stop the spread of germs this winter with Dettol Instant Hand Sanitizer.
Right, well, it's not winter, but I've got my safety kit with me. So where should we start with? Let me see. Here we are. I've got my sanitizer. Yeah, got me. It's non-existent in the supermarket. Yes, you can't have this. Sue's put me under very strict orders that nobody's allowed to pinch any of this stuff. We've got our Panadol. Yes, got a Panadol. What else have we got here? Oh! What our toilet paper. Yeah. And that's silly, isn't it? Because we're one of the countries that manufacture toilet paper. Yeah, never mind. Alrighty, what else? Oh, I've got my mask. You can't get those anywhere either. Yeah, yeah. Made in China. Can you still hear me? No, I'll take that off. So anyway, I've got my mask. And just because I'm very cautious, I've got my goggles. Oh, and I forgot the wet wipes. You got the wet wipes? Yep, I've got those sorted. Thank you for that reminder. Don't flush them down the toilet. And I've got these, just so that I don't hear all those panic and paranoia. Yeah. And last but not least, I've got this coat to really wrap myself up in, and so that you can see me coming and choose what you do then. So, we live in strange times, don't we? We do. I'm packing these away. Yep. Very good. There you go. If you want a painting of a toilet roll, just to remind you what they looked like. There you go. Let's put up our first slide. Because I trust you got that some of that was tongue-in-cheek. Yep. This doesn't seem to be sitting quite right. Personal hygiene is the best way of dealing with viruses. Yeah? Yep. We don't need to worry about the toilet paper. There's plenty of that. Yep. And the other things, we need to just be careful, don't we? We don't want to lapse into panic and paranoia. The basic things, like up there, this is from the Ministry of Health website. Hand hygiene. Washing your hands regularly. Soap and water is best. Sanitizer second. Yep. Yep. Just remember that. Apparently, there are different ways of making sure you wash your hands long enough. You can sing happy birthday to yourself. Twice, apparently. Alternative version is, if you're recovery church oriented, you can do the serenity prayer at a serene pace twice. There you go. So there's two options for your hand washing. Stay at home if you're sick. Sorry? Twice. I did say that, I think. Yes. At a serene pace. Yes, yes. Stay at home if you're sick. Don't spread it. That's a good one. Coughing or sneezing into a tissue or your elbow. Yep, and then doing the hand hygiene thing and getting rid of the tissue quickly. Yeah. And cleaning surfaces regularly. But don't flush them down the toilet. Yep, so basic hygiene is the best protection for any virus. There's been some very big announcements by the Prime Minister last night, closing our borders and doing all sorts of things. But the basic, keep yourself safe. Good hygiene. But my message is not really about that. But there's a link. I think there's a link. I'm thinking about community hygiene as well. Today, first anniversary of the Christchurch shootings. Yep. Yeah. So some areas of our society are not well. Yeah. And I'm thinking we still suffer in New Zealand from family violence, child abuse, elder abuse. People still struggle with mental illness and addictions. Maori and Pacifica find themselves at the bottom of the heap in terms of all sorts of social and economic indicators. Migrants and refugees find it hard to settle. Yeah. Beneficiaries and invalids occasionally come in for a bit of beneficiary bashing. Yeah. The rainbow community still struggle to feel accepted and part of us. There are issues around our community hygiene. That we need to make sure we don't ignore. Yep. And where are we going with this? Well, we're all going back into Haggai. And this is the blunt message that Haggai gives to the people. Then Haggai said, so this people is contaminated. Their nation is contaminated. Everything they do is contaminated. Whatever they do for me is contaminated. God says so. What a harsh message. Yeah? We'll unpack that in a bit. I see I've got 21 minutes and need 10 seconds to go. There's a rebuild timeline. Let's just do that reminder. 586 BC, temple is burned, Jerusalem walls are destroyed, the people are exiled. In 538 BC, what's that, 50, 60 years later, something like that, Cyrus allows the exiles to return. 536 BC, the temple foundations are restored, but the rebuilding stalls. Some external opposition and a lot of internal reluctance. Then 520 BC, Haggai calls for a restart on the rebuild. And it seems to work, because by 516 BC, the temple is rebuilt. Okay, so that's the context. His first prophecy, and this is just a summary of it. Challenge from God. My people, why should you be living in well-built houses while my temple lies in ruins? But rebuild my temple, he says. And then he promises, I will be with you. That is my promise. Yep. Prophecy number 2 from Haggai. Again, God speaking. Who of you is left who saw this house in its former glory? How does it look to you now? Does it not seem to you like nothing? And then the challenge, be strong and work. And then the promise, I will fill this house with glory, and in this place I will grant peace. Peace in the sense of shalom, that really big, broad, well-being peace. Yep. Okay, so that's that. And let's get on with the prophecy for today. And here it is, from Haggai 2, 10 to 19, if you've got your Bibles there. So on the 24th day of the 9th month, again, this was in the 2nd year of Darius, God's message came to Haggai. God of the angel armies speaks. Consult the priests for a ruling. So let's just get a bit of context to this. According to those who know these things, this was said on December the 18th, 520 BC. Of course, in those days and in that culture, they didn't call it December the 20th, December the 18th, but that's okay. That's just for our benefit of understanding when it was. Okay? So that's in the northern winter. Yep. 4 months since the first rebuilding prophecy. 3 months since the people had begun the rebuilding. 2 months since the second prophecy. And after Zechariah, another prophet, Zechariah's first call for repentance. At a time when the people in the land were waiting for the winter rains that would allow them to begin the planting of the crops for the new year. Okay, so that's some of the background. And God gets Haggai to ask the priest for a ruling about the law. So let's carry on with the reading. And here's the question that Haggai says. If somebody carries a piece of sacred meat in his pocket, meat that is set up, I don't know why you'd put meat in a pocket, but let's get on with it. Meat that is set apart for sacrifice on the altar, and the pocket touches a loaf of bread, a dish of stew, a bottle of wine or oil, or any other food, will these foods be made holy by such contact? They had some very interesting laws in those days, yeah? My take on a lot of them is that they were early health and safety stuff, but they were also lots of ceremonial, religious, ritual stuff. Okay, this is one of those religious ritual ones. Okay, and the priest said, nah. You know, holiness is not contagious. Yeah, is what he's saying. Part 2. Then Haggai said, how about someone who is contaminated by touching a corpse? If that person touches one of these foods, will it be contaminated? The priest said, yes, it will be contaminated. Interesting. Yeah? So uncleanness, contamination is much more infectious than holiness. Interesting. And of course, in different cultures, approaches to death is different. Yeah? So in that context, in that culture, in that geography, where it's a whole lot hotter and things decay a whole lot faster, you can see there's some health and safety issues around dealing with death. And so that's part of the background of that. Okay, so, and that's when Haggai says this bit. So this people is contaminated. Their nation is contaminated. Everything they do is contaminated. Whatever they do for me is contaminated. God says so. Woo! Imagine receiving that message. Ha! Say what? Wow. What's that about? So let's do some. So Haggai uses these ceremonial purity laws to illustrate some deeper problems. Yep. So the people had been assuming that since they were back in the Holy Land, they were doing holy work, they were offering holy worship, they just assumed that all was right between them and God. But they were neglecting, ignoring the ruined temple. And that neglect contaminated all of their work and their worship. Wow. That's a pretty strong word, isn't it? Yeah, that's a pretty strong word. So carry on with the prophecy. Haggai says, think back. Before you set out to lay the first foundation stones for the rebuilding of my temple, how did it go with you? Isn't it true that your foot-dragging, half-hearted efforts at rebuilding the temple of God were reflected in a sluggish, halfway return on your crops? Half the grain you were used to getting, half the wine. If you're wondering what translation this is, it's the Message translation, which is very, what's the word? It's quite powerful in terms of picking up the heart of what's going on in this story. Yep. And God continues through Haggai. I hit you with drought and blight and hail. Everything you were doing got hit, but it didn't seem to faze you. You continued to ignore me. God's decree. So drought and blight and hail. You read the book of Deuteronomy. Some of those are put down as curses for disobedience. And remembering what Woody was talking about, alluding to some of the plagues, some of those are sort of mentioned in here as well. The implication there is a reminder to the people, hey, just get yourself sorted, basically. So, neglecting the temple, Haggai reminded them, had had a damaging impact on their welfare. Yep. And he was saying, look back, think back, see it. And Haggai also pointed out that opportunities to turn back and trust God had been ignored. Yep. So he invited them to think back, but now Haggai invites them to look forward. Now think ahead from this same date. This 24th day of the 9th month, Think ahead from when the temple rebuilding was launched. Has anything in your fields, vine, fig tree, pomegranate, olive tree, failed to flourish? From now on, you can count on a blessing. Wow. Isn't that great? Slap around the face. Wake up. But from now on, you can count on a blessing. That's a powerful way of doing a message, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So God sees the changed attitudes and actions. Yeah. And he delivers blessing to reinforce that change. So one of the writers, commentators, had the suggestion that maybe what had happened was the winter rains had arrived. And Haggai just picks up on that, says, there's the sign of God's blessing. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? We could do with some rain here. Mind you, we've been having a little bit of rain, haven't we? Yeah. Some hints of rain that have been useful for us here and there. So, what about rebuilding Whangarei core as we watch this big building take shape out there? You know, I think it's an opportunity for us to think about rebuilding, building us up as a fellowship. Because in the end, that's just a building. You know, the real temple is all of us and all of the work that happens in this building throughout the week. Yeah. So let's start with some things around personal hygiene in terms of the spiritual stuff. Just as reminders that, you know, delving into the Bible, prayer, worship, being involved in the mission. A good personal spiritual hygiene. Maybe picking up that idea that Jesus highlighted, that the two great commandments are love God and love your neighbour as you love yourself. Those are two key things just to say, keep those in the front of my mind, and some of the rest becomes periphery and unimportant stuff. Yeah? How about focusing on growing the fruit of the Spirit? That's a good thought, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Or allowing the Spirit to help us grow those fruit. Maybe that's better. Paul particularly writes in his letters a lot about putting off bad habits, putting on good habits. Yeah, those are hygiene things. Yeah. And for those of you familiar with 12 Steps in Recovery Church, Step 10 talks about taking personal daily inventory. Yep. Making sure you keep up to date with how things are and sorting stuff. That's some personal hygiene ideas. What about us as a core? How do we keep on track in terms of what it is that we need to be doing? I like Acts 2, 42 to 47 because they give a picture of what the early church was like and what they thought was important. And that talks about nurture. How do we find ways to make sure we nurture people as disciples in the faith? You know, how do we grow people in the faith? What's our worship like? Does it actually focus us and lead us to God? Those are good questions to ask. As a community, are we really working as a community? You know, do we operate as a community? Do we, get beyond surface politeness? Yeah, to something more. And as a church, as a core, are we involved in mission out into our neighbourhood? That's a good question to ask, aren't they? Phil Yancey, a Christian writer, has another way of summing it up. He talks about look up, look around, look outward, look inward. He says, look up. And that's a way of saying, let's make sure, ask the question, does our worship point us to God? You know? Do we get beyond having a good emotional experience or performing well? Does our worship actually focus us towards God? Yeah? Look around. Go on, do it. Look around. Notice the variety, the diversity, the weird people God gathers together. Yeah? And that's a good sign in a church. If everyone looked like me, it would be a very boring church. Yeah? If everyone looked like you, But a sign of a good church is there's plenty of variety and diversity. And respect about that variety and diversity. Yeah. Look outward. Yeah. Look into the community. Look into the neighbourhood. What are the needs out there? And are we asking the question, are we doing what we can to meet the needs out there in the community? And finally, look inward. And Phil Yancey says, look inward and check that ask the question about the way we interact with each other. Is that characterized by grace and mercy? I think that's a really good little framework for just checking the hygiene of us as a fellowship. And we've got some reminders up there. That one there, my shorthand version, we bring people to Jesus. That's a good check, isn't it? Saying, whatever else we do, are we doing that? And I like to, is it still down there? Yes, it is. I like that one there. Are we doing the very best we can to make sure we're a house of prayer for all nations? Again, that idea of inclusiveness and variety. Those are all ways that can help us keep on track as a fellowship, so that we don't have to have a Haggai stand up and say, you're contaminated, get out your sanitizer. Yeah? Yeah. So think back. So we are God's temple here. And I think, the prophecy of Haggai, I think that invites us to ask some questions. Is there some trust to build or rebuild between people? Are there some places where there's trust has been battered and bruised? Yep. Are there conflicts that we need to work through rather than trying to ignore? Yep. Are there commitments that we need to just make sure we're clear on what it is that God is calling us to offer as part of being in this fellowship? Yeah. Are there relationships to restore? Because in a place like this, with a variety of weird people all through it, there's bound to be some times when we bruise each other. Yeah. And some opportunities to think back and say, okay, there's some work to be done. Yep. Okay, so think back. But let's not stay there. Look forward. And remember from Haggai, God sees changed attitudes and actions in us. Yeah. He recognizes when we recognize we need some business to do. And I would say it's fair to derive from Haggai that God delivers blessing to reinforce whatever changes we choose to do. Yeah? So, that's the message for today. An invitation to think about our personal hygiene. I didn't put a deodorant in my bag. Maybe I should have done that. Sorry. Just to really get off track. But I'm going to invite the music team to come up, and they're going to lead us in a song that has words around inviting God to build my life. Yep. Which, written that way, is about personal hygiene, how we are personally with God, which is a good place to start. But I want to suggest that as a song, it can be done as us, as a fellowship saying, we want you, Lord, to be building the life of this temple. As we watch the building take shape, we want to make sure that as a fellowship, we are in good health as well. And so we're going to invite the music team to sing this song. And as always, at the end of Salvation Army meetings, we invite... Oops, I've just gone off air. No, I'm back on air again. Invite people to come forward and pray, kneel and pray. If there's something in whatever's been said and done throughout the service, the meeting today, that God is saying to you through His Spirit, we need some work to do. There's some rebuilding to do. Take the opportunity to come and pray as the worship team lead us in this song. Thank you.